The essay Recollections of Childhood by Richard Steele is prescribed for the students of BA Part 1 English Literature in Paper 2, that is English Prose and Fiction. Before we look at the essay, first let us examine the biography of Sir Richard Steele. The British essayist and dramatist and politician Sir Richard Steele, whose dates are 1672 to 1729, is best known for his collaboration with Addison. This is Joseph Addison, whose essay Meditations in Westminster Abbey we have already seen in detail, on a series of essays for the Tatler and the Spectator. Tatler and Spectator were two journals or magazines that were brought out by both these writers, Richard Steele and Joseph Addison, in collaboration. यानी कि दोनों ने मिल के ये दोनों मैगजीन्स का प्रकाशन किया था. Richard Steele was born in Dublin, Ireland in March 1672. The exact date of his birth is not known, but he was baptized on March 12th. Steele's father, an attorney, died in 1676 and his mother died the next year. He was placed under the guardianship of his maternal uncle, meaning his mother's brother, Henry Gascoigne, who was secretary and confidential agent to the Duke of Ormonde. In 1684, he began attending Charterhouse School, London, where he met Joseph Addison. Both Steele and Addison went to Oxford, Steele entering Christ College in 1689 and transferring to Merton College in 1691. His Oxford career was undistinguished, and he left in 1692 without taking a degree in order to volunteer for cadet service under the command of the Duke of Ormonde. Steele then served in the Life Guards and later transferred to the Coldstream Guards. In 1695, Lord Cutts, to whom Steele had dedicated a poem on the funeral of Queen Mary, became Steele's patron. Steele first served him as private secretary and then became an officer in Cutts' regiment in 1697. 2 years later, Steele received a captaincy in a foot regiment, meaning he joined the Army of England. During these years in military service in London, Steele became acquainted with the circle of literary and artistic figures, and he began to write. His first comedy, The Funeral or Grief a la Mode, was performed successfully at Drury Lane Theatre in 1701. This play was a satire on the new profession of undertaking. Undertakers are people who perform all the funeral rites in Christian countries, basically. It was followed by The Lying Lover or The Lady's Friendship in 1703. His third comedy, The Tender Husband or The Accomplished Fools, produced in 1705, achieved some success, perhaps because Addison helped him to write it. A constant need for money dominated much of Steele's life because his spending habits were impulsive and extravagant. In 1705, he married an elderly and propertied widow, Margaret Stretch. She died in 1706, leaving him an annual income of £850, and in 1707 Steele married Mary Scurlock, who died in 1718. The dear Prue of a series of delightful letters he addressed to her. They had 4 children, but only Elizabeth, the eldest daughter, survived to maturity. Steele lived in considerable style after his second marriage, and his habits continued to be free spending and improvident. In other words, he did not save at all. He left the army in 1707, or perhaps earlier, and in the years following secured several minor appointments. On April 12, 1709, Steele launched his own paper, The Tatler, to be published 3 times weekly. Partly a newspaper and partly a journal of politics and of society events, the Tatler soon featured essays on general questions of manners, morality, and entertainment. The great majority of the Tatler issues were authored by Steele, Addison writing about 46 by himself and about 36 in conjunction with Steele. The Tatler, though prosperous, discontinued publication for obscure reasons on January 2nd, 1711. The first issue of the Tatler's brilliant successor, The Spectator, appeared on March 1st, 1711. It was a joint venture of Steele and Addison, who was the chief contributor to the new paper. However, in this paper, as in the Tatler, Addison followed Steele's choice of subjects. The Steele-Addison literary partnership ranks as one of the most successful in the history of English literature. Both men were Whigs. Whig is a political party of England, or rather used to be a political party of England. One was Whigs and the other one was Tory. Both men were Whigs and sympathized with the moral attitudes of England's rapidly growing middle class. They differed greatly in temperament, Steele being impulsive and warm-hearted, and Addison restrained and sedate. Steele, The Spectator, had a run of 555 daily numbers, discontinuing publication on December 6th, 1712. Of this number, Steele authored about 240 issues. Steele made many additional forays into periodical journalism. The most notable of these, some of which were purely political, were The Guardian, March 12th to October 1st, 1713, The Englishman, October 6th, 1713 to Feb 11th, 1714, and then again July 11th to November 21st, 1715, and The Lover, February 25th to May 27th, 1714, which saw the publication of 40 essays by Steele. The Plebeian, 1718, Steele's most famous political journal, involved him in a dispute with Addison, whose death in 1719 frustrated Steele's attempt at reconciliation. During these years of Steele served as the chief Whig propagandist. As the principal journalist of the Whigs in opposition, he was the antagonist of Jonathan Swift, who held the corresponding job for the Tories. As I told you, Tories were the second political party. Steele's writings frequently made his political career perilous, meaning under threat. Appointed Commissioner of Stamps in 1710, he was forced to resign from his office in 1713. That same year, he was elected to Parliament from Stockbridge, but he was expelled in 1714 on a charge of sedition. After the accession of George I to the English throne in 1714, Steele obtained a number of political favors. In 1715, he was knighted and was re-elected to Parliament. Steele's intemperance gradually undermined his health, and he suffered from gout for many years. Gout is a medical condition in which there is excess of protein in the body, which is not flushed out. In 1722, he wrote his last and most successful comedy, The Conscious Lovers. In 1724, still notoriously improvident, impulsive, ostentatious, and generous, Steele was forced to retire from London because of his mounting debts and his worsening health. He went to live on his wife's estate of Langunner in Wales, and in 1726 he suffered a paralytic stroke. His health broken, Steele died at Carmarthen, Wales on September 1st, 1729. Legacy. Both as man and writer, Steele is one of the most attractive figures of his time. Much of his writing, easy, rapid, slipshod, but deeply sincere, reflecting his personality. There appears in his natural temper, wrote his contemporary, the philosopher George Berkeley, something very generous and a great benevolence to mankind. An emotional impetus, an emotional, impetuous, good-natured and idealistic man, he always found it easier to get money than to keep it, and his career can be seen as in part shaped by the constant need to keep his head above the waters of debt. Debt yani ki karza. That's all about Richard Steele, the essay writer. In the next session, we will look at the essay Recollections of Childhood.